Hello and welcome to In the Frame, the gallery's online talk series that unpacks the connections between art, ideas, and the issues that matter most to us today. My name is Daniel Browning, and I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'm also the presenter of The Art Show on ABC Radio National. Joining us this evening from Whakaoriori in Aotearoa, also known as Masterton, New Zealand, is artist Robin White to chat about her new work, Viola, currently on display at the gallery for the Matisse Alive exhibition. It's one of 4 works. If you have any questions for Robin over the next 30 minutes, please pop them into the comments and we'll get to them at the end of the talk. And just by way of introduction, Robin White was born in Te Puke in New Zealand in 1946. She gained a diploma from the Elam School of Fine Arts in 1967, and after a period as an art teacher, worked as a full-time artist since 1973. Often described as a regionalist for her focus on people and place as her subject matter, the hard-edge realist style of her 1970s paintings and screen prints was transferred to a new medium when she left New Zealand in 1982 to live on the island of Tarawa in the Central Pacific Republic of Kiribati. Her subject matter changed to images of atoll life, and woodblock prints prevailed. After fire destroyed her studio in 1996, she began to work collaboratively with Indigenous Pacific artists, an approach that White has continued since returning to New Zealand in 1999, exploring creative potential in the space between traditional and contemporary art practice. Robin White, welcome to In the Frame.
Thank you very much, Daniel.
Now, your work for the Matisse Alive exhibition, the subject of this conversation tonight, I got to see it today. I want to talk first of all, though, about the kind of inspiration that Matisse represents in your own life as an artist. Were you always inspired by this particular artist, or was it something that happened as a result of the Matisse Alive exhibition?
Oh, you know, Matisse was this figure that was always hovering around in the background and coming to the foreground every now and then. I first became aware of his work when I was at high school. I was very interested in art and specialising in art at high school. And so yeah, it was at that time that I became aware of his work. And that interest in him kind of followed me through. And then actually quite recently, because of the work that I had been doing in 2017 in Fiji, actually, working collaboratively in Fiji, and the way in which I had been working in Fiji with my collaborator there, whose name is Tamari Dambe Ikanadea, we found that the work we were doing was shifting away from the more kind of flat pattern traditional mode into something that encompassed space and suggested interior spaces, and that re-energized my interest in Matisse and his handling of space, interior spaces. So when I was visiting overseas, I was overseas in 2017, and then again, I think in 2018, I took advantage of opportunities to go and see the work of Matisse whenever I could, and then, you know, when to get the commission to make works for Matisse Alive just came at a really good time. I had already gone deeper into what Matisse was on about, so it was just a perfect timing. Really, very, very lucky.
Now, having seen, there are 4 works that I'd like to talk about that you've produced for the Matisse Alive exhibition, extraordinary works on bark cloth. And I want to talk very much about this material, the materiality of bark cloth, extraordinary beaten, very traditional material. talk to me a little bit about your attraction to what drew you to bark cloth, and that as the medium you might use to express this affinity with Matisse's interiors.
My first attraction to bark cloth was on a somewhat of a more superficial level, I suppose. Traveling in and out of different countries in the Pacific, where it is part of, the natural art expression. I was aware of it, especially in Fiji, coming through Fiji backwards and forwards in transit from Kiribati back to New Zealand and so on. I'd see these beautiful examples of masi, bark cloth, in the transit lounge at the airport in Nandi. And then my stopovers in Fiji became longer, and I got to know people living there and staying with them. And in particular, I made friends with a lady called Lemba Toki who worked on bark cloth. And that was her art form. And we formed a collaborative partnership that was a wonderful experience. And it was really working with that material that I came to develop more and more a huge respect for it. It's Daniel, you'd know this. You'd be familiar with masi, and also with bark cloth in Tonga. It's the same thing. There is the beauty of working on bark cloth as a painter is the fantastic coherence of the materials you're working with and the place from which they come, because all of them grow from the same earth. That you're working with the earth pigments, and that is the same earth that grows the plant from which the painted surface is created for you. And then the same earth grows the plants from which you make the dyes that bind the pigment. There's a fantastic sense of connection that is a very beautiful aspect of working with tapa. And, it's hard to feel that, going into an art shop and taking tubes of oil paint off the shelf. It's a very different feeling.
Not quite a roll of canvas. No, this is beaten cloth.
Yes.
It's so incredibly circular, this process of working with earth pigments. I understand in one of the works, in Matisse Alive, this red color, I'm talking about this extraordinary Rothko-esque central, for me, the most moving of your works in the exhibition is this kind of portal. It's a dark, it's a black bark cloth. There it's a tradition too, I understand, in Tonga, of black bark cloth. Can you talk me through that particular work, the name of which you might share with the audience?
The work you refer to, Daniel, is Hufanga-anga. The names of these works, Viola and Hufanga-anga, were given to the works I made with Ebony, Fifita, given the names by Ebony's grandmother, Akesa Fifita. And she talked about the significance of those words. Hufanga-anga means like a sanctuary, a place where you can go for protection. And so there is a lot about black. Actually, the interesting connection with Matisse is the window at Collioure. The fact that he painted a black window. So obviously, Matisse is someone who knew how to use black, and I really love that aspect of his work. But here, with that work, Hufanga-anga, it's called a ngatu uli, meaning a bark cloth painted black. And in Tongan tradition, they're the most important, most sacred of that particular art form of painting on bark cloth. And they are always used for ceremonial circumstances and for royal occasions. So black it represents the deepest part of the ocean. It also represents that which is beyond our reach. It's the next life. It's that, that spiritual dimension which is not available to us. It's beyond our worldly limitations. So it has this sacred quality, and it has that power of drawing you in, doesn't it? Very powerful.
It's profoundly moving work, and we're seeing images of the window at Collioure, Matisse's, and people went back to this example of Matisse at his most abstract. He's painting a window, but it's so much a portal to some other world. When we kind of go into Matisse's journey to Tahiti in 1930, there's an interesting quote that I want to share with you. And Robin, we've talked about this briefly off air, if you will, and that is a quote where Matisse describes not only the things that motivate him as an artist, but what he might find on this journey to the Pacific in 1930. He says, "I've often travelled in my imagination, and since the main goal of my work is clarity of light, I ask myself, what must it be like on the other side of the hemisphere?" There's so much about Matisse and so much about this particular exhibition, Matisse Alive. That clarity of light, what does that mean for you as an artist who works in this hemisphere?
It just further cemented my appreciation of Matisse, reading about him saying this, and reading his descriptions of arriving in the Pacific. He arrived in Papeete and was not at all impressed.
No, he wasn't.
He thought he had just arrived, and suddenly, he's thinking, "Oh gosh, this is a terrible mistake. I can't go back. I have to wait." When you make those long journeys, you're stuck. So he was really regretting it right from the get-go. But then he was offered a journey away to the Tuamotu archipelago, and there he spent 4 days on the atoll of Whakarawa, and that's where he had his epiphany. And he said, "I saw the light." Those were the words he used to describe his
conversion
for him on Whakarawa. And
his
I
conversion.
love those descriptions of him sitting in the in the lagoon, and kind of every now and then bobbing his head down under the water and seeing the fish, and then coming up again and seeing the birds, and understanding the interconnectedness of sky and sea. It's hard to describe. I lived on an atoll for 17 years, and I just knew exactly what he was talking about. There's nothing like it. It's a very distinct kind of environment, and the sea and the sky kind of blend. They just become one vastness, and you're confronted by this horizon, which, like every horizon, it just suggests foreverness, because no sooner do you approach it than it recedes. There is this incredible openness, and the light is unbelievable, because the floor of an atoll is coral sand, and it reflects the sun back up from it. So it's an amazingly clear, gem-like clarity. It's extraordinary. Yeah, so it's not surprising that he had a life-changing experience on Whakarawa. And he was only there for 4 days, and he left, and he gets back to Papeete and couldn't wait to get on the ship to go back home.
Well, we do see, I do see an incredible relationship between Matisse when he starts to use the cutout technique, by which time he's largely unable to paint and he uses the cutout technique. And these are, you know, the images from the late 30s and 40s, where he really sings. These colors explode, and what he can do with scissors is extraordinary, and it, in many ways, in my imagination, supplants what he ever did with paint. But the exhibition Matisse Alive includes these tivaivai, the applique quilts, if you like, by women from the Cook Islands community, and they're an extraordinary facet of this exhibition. But if we go back to the works that you produced, I want to talk about your collaborations. There are some collaborations that we need to talk about. You talked about Ebony Fafita and Taiko Ogawa, and Ebony's grandmother too. Talk about those collaborations and the strength of those collaborations in terms of what we see.
The thing about working collaboratively, Daniel, is that, you know, you're making something that could never be done on your own. You know, the whole point of collaboration is that you know, you could people come together. Myself and those whom I work with, we come together and we each bring something that is something unique that we each have to offer. And so the work is the sum total of many parts. It's
hard to encapsulate, isn't it?
Yeah, it is hard to put it. I mean, I think in many ways another reason why I'm attracted to the notion of working collaboratively is that it's also a way of learning and hopefully offering examples of how all of us, whomever we happen to be and wherever we are having to do this. And that is learning how to work together in communities that are becoming more and more diverse. You know, as people are swept from their homelands across continents and fetch up in places like New Zealand and Australia and other places, these wonderful people who come from vastly different cultures, you know, that seems to be a big question that we face as humanity, as societies everywhere. How do we learn to work together? And so I think, you know, one of the things that is bigger than just the art that we produce is the actual process of producing it. To me, is a really something valuable that I hope we can offer.
And we do see in the video, there's an accompanying video to the exhibition, your work in Matisse Alive, and we see that sense of community and all of you working together. What we're seeing on screen too, extraordinary exchanges, and you know, it was tipping with rain on one occasion there, but you're still working away, applying those pigments to that beautiful bark cloth. I want to talk about some of the other works. You know, we talked first of all about for what for me is the central work, the black bark cloth. There's another work, and these are interiors on bark cloth, like Matisse might paint. You represent him. He's present there as a iconographically as a hat sometimes. Talk to me about the iconography of the images you've made, you've represented on bark cloth.
Well, okay. Maybe I'll just backtrack slightly, and I'm thinking back to the moment when it was actually Justin Patton. He walked into this very room in my studio and asked me if I'd be interested in this, participating in this exhibition. And the brief I was given was to respond to Matisse in the Pacific. And so I decided, right, well, I'll position myself in the Pacific, which is where we are here in New Zealand. This is the Pacific. But by that I meant really positioning myself also within a Pacific Island tradition of image making, and then return the gaze to Matisse from within that space of being in the Pacific, and respond to his work that he produced in France, in the south of France, and his interiors. So it's kind of taking a Pacific tradition and kind of blending it with his use of space and objects in space, and the way he referred to his objects as his actors, and he's in each paintings he's rearranging the same things. You know, the vases, the coffee pot, they pop up all, you know, over and over again, and the various chairs and so on. You start to get to know his furniture after a while. And so he rearranges them. He talks of them as his actors. So they're sort of, you can create narratives around these things. But they weren't just objects for him either. They had some meaning. He was an incredible op shopper, you know, secondhand, loved it. And, you know, so am I for that matter. But he would find an object and imbue it with some kind of life force, you know, and a hidden meaning. So I've taken these objects and that have been arranged, and they each have a story behind them. There's a reason for them being there, and some of them are there as a result of consultation with others, like the table that you're showing at the moment. Ebony and I had a chat with Akesa, Grandma, and what would you like to put on the table? What shall we bring to the table that represents you, Akesa? And she said a pineapple, because she and her husband on the island of Vava'u were known for their pineapple plantation. That was the great skill of Ebony's grandfather, growing pineapples. So, you know, those are little things. They all have a little story behind them.
Yeah, it is strange how you turn your gaze back towards the interiors, but your interiors are, they're not even Matisse-like, but they are recognizable, I guess, in the sense that Matisse spent so much time trying to represent this interior world. Your images, though, are quite something. They're not quotes or direct references to Matisse. They are, and we're seeing on the screen these kind of flat renderings, and I don't mean that as an insult. They are in their tradition, must be represented in this way. I feel what I felt, and you haven't seen the exhibition, but what I felt with the low light was a sense of reverence, and you described a sense of reverence in approaching the collaboration and the working with bark cloth. Talk to me a little. We have only a couple of minutes left, about that reverence, you know, and a reverential way of working when you're working with this very special material.
Part of it is to do with, you know, they are just the sense of what it means to be an artist, working creatively, using your hands. Where does that inspiration, where does this gift come from? You know, this is something that I share with the people I work with. This sense that what we're given to work with is not from us. It's a gift of the Holy Spirit. It's a spiritual. It's an act of faith. It's a very spiritual. It's something sacred, and you know, something that you treat with respect. So the whole manner of working is the environment of the workplace itself the care of the materials you're working with, everything is imbued with that sense of where does this inspiration come from? You know, it touches everything, and the way we speak with one another, the way we consult with each other, being humble in terms of taking ego out of the picture and listening to each other and allowing for that input. That's all part of the sense of reverence that you bring to the work and the materials. So there's a coherence to it all.
Well, I can guarantee reverence is something that you'll feel when you see these particular works. Robin, it's been lovely for you to join me tonight for In the Frame, and I commend you on this work, and I encourage people to go and see it. So thank you so much for being my guest tonight.
Oh, thank you, Daniel. It's lovely meeting you, and great to have this opportunity to chat with you.
And on that note, thanks very much for joining us this evening. The free exhibition Matisse Alive is ticketed. It's part of the ticketed exhibition Matisse Life and Spirit Masterpieces from the Centre Pompidou, Paris. It's on display now at the Art Gallery of New South Wales. Please see their website for details and to book tickets. In the Frame is supported by Macquarie University and the Art Gallery Society of New South Wales. My name is Daniel Browning. I'll see you next time.